We talked about Elon. I'm going to ask you about Elon. So here's an article from Unheard. Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk won't save us. Okay.
They actually titled that and not me, but I'll tell you what I said.
Okay, I'm going to read it to you so you can go. So effectively, a bunch of big banks get in bed with a bunch of woke millennials together. They birthed woke capitalism. They use that to occupy Wall Street up for adoption. Elon Musk's ongoing release of Twitter files arguably demonstrates more than a fair weather commitment to, if not ending, then certainly denouncing censorship as well as government collusion with big tech. Be that it may be, in Ramaswamy's opinion, the need for deeper institutional change remains. In his view, Musk will still have to play by the rules if he wants Twitter to survive, and there is one master he will always have to appease. The master is known as the CCP, that both Tim Cook and Elon Musk probably have to bow down to on any given day. So in a certain sense, if you bow down to the same master, maybe your brothers in arms. So what do you think about what Elon Musk's up to and what he's doing?
So I'll give you 90% of my opinion, which is the less interesting part, and then I'll get to the 10% that I think we got that's worth calling out for what it is.
Okay.
The 90% is I am a free speech zealot myself. I'm a free speech absolutist. I believe that's part of what it means to be American. I think he's a hero for taking the risk, personal risk. That's my definition of courage, is taking a personal risk to advance your convictions. What does that mean? You have convictions and you're willing to take risk. He's done both those things in trying to turn Twitter into a free speech platform. I respect it. Second thing he's done that I respect, and I think we could use more of this in our government, is he's completely decimated the managerial class. Okay, and this is one of my big themes, is you have a managerial class of bureaucrats in the public and private sectors that are, by the way, some of the same people. Okay, associate deans at universities to mid to upper level management at Twitter to the deputy undersecretary of whatever to some ambassador. I think he has completely taken that managerial layer out of Twitter. Personally, I think it's what the next U.S. president needs to do to the federal bureaucratic alphabet soup as well. So those are all things that I think he gives us a model for inspiration, a model for hope. I take inspiration from it. I agree with all of it. Two things I disagree with. Okay, one is an area where I think he can do better. He says he wants to turn Twitter into a free speech platform. I agree with that goal. I think that is genuinely his goal. However, he also says things like, as he did in New York City, some number of months ago, well, maybe we don't want the 10% on either extreme, the far left or the far right, that we want to serve the 80% of the people in the middle. My view is that is going in the wrong direction, okay? He met with advertisers, brought civil rights representatives in, tries to appease advertisers, still saying that they have content moderation, still showing that it's just a moderate vision. And so I think that Elon goes back and forth between being a free speech absolutist and believing in actually operating a free speech platform and operating a platform that improves off of its one-sided political censorship, but only by a little bit, to say that, okay, now we're going to apply a politically centrist model of censorship, that it's not Republican or Democrat, but it's centrist. And yet we're still going to make those centralized decisions that something is too far on the fringe, then it's out of the fray, then it's off the site. But it's applying the centrist model and trying to appease advertisers that way. I disagree with that. I think that the principle of operating a free speech platform means that there is no viewpoint-based discrimination, period. That there should be nobody determining whether something is centrist or extreme right or moderate right.
Anything goes in your eyes.
Any viewpoint goes. And I've written about this in the Wall Street Journal. I lay this out, all right? So no viewpoint discrimination. That means hate speech as a category goes away, because hate speech is just someone else's opinion. Now, when it comes to misinformation or alleged misinformation, you have the burden of proof of proving that it was false before removing it. That's a very high burden. Most of the time, almost ever, are you going to meet that? That's okay. That's the standard. Government collusion, nada. Okay, if you are going to collaborate with any government, you need to publicly disclose it and not engage in any form of government collusion. And then there's the final element here, which is, if in doubt, give the power back to the user. Let the user decide what they do and don't get to see, rather than making those determinations centrally. That's what it means to operate a free speech platform. And I worry that he on a given day, sometimes what it seems like he's actually operating is a platform that's just using politically centrist censorship rather than far left censorship, which I guess if I had to pick between the two, I guess I would choose the centrist one, but only by a little bit. That's not what it means to operate a free speech platform. Then there's the piece about China. Okay. Elon's commentary about Taiwan, I found publicly revolting. I found it repulsive. The idea that Taiwan should submit itself to become just a special administrative region, basically part of China. And I worry about this because he gets an attaboy on the back from the Chinese government for the Shanghai factory where they got some tax cut right after that. But it's not just Elon here. This is the game that China plays by design. It's like the Trojan War. Okay, Greece was not going to defeat Troy militarily any more than China was ever going to defeat the U.S. militarily. But what did Greece do? They gave them the Trojan horse, the beautiful gift that they knew Troy could not resist. Troy opened the front door. They came right in. What was inside that horse burned Troy down. That's what's going on in America. Where they knew the Trojan horse, the beautiful horse, the gift that we cannot resist, is the appearance of global capitalism itself. Okay, green pieces of paper, maybe different shades of green if we chase them in other currencies in other parts of the world. They know that's the sweet siren song we can't resist. But you know what the CCP does is they say you can't do business here, you can't make things here, you can't sell things here. If you criticize the CCP, if you apply a constraint here like an emissions cap or whatever, but they will roll out the red carpet to anyone who criticizes the United States because they know that undermines America's greatest asset of all. And that is not our nuclear arsenal. It is our moral standing on the global stage. And so that is why certainly Tim Cook and Larry Fink are Xi Jinping's circus monkeys. He will say jump, she will say jump. Tim Cook or Larry Fink will ask how high. But I think if we're just being honest arbiters here, and I say this as somebody who's 90% of my public commentary has been very supportive of what Elon Musk is doing, I respect it. But I'm also not into hero worship. I don't care who it is, okay? Too much of our country, including the conservative movement in this country, has got into replacing the need for Christ with these Christ-like messiahs from, one political figure to a business figure. But the real question is we have to see the vulnerabilities. And I think one of those vulnerabilities, evidenced in his comments about Taiwan, is possibly the need to do business and produce in China.
So there's the article, by the way. Elon Musk's unsolicited idea for Taiwan, welcomed by Beijing, slammed in Taipei. If you go a little lower, this is what you're referencing, I'm assuming, right? My recommendation would be figure out a special administrative zone for Taiwan that is reasonably palpable, probably won't make everybody happy, Musk said to Financial Times. And it's possible, and I think probably, in fact, that they could have an arrangement that's more lenient than Hong Kong. And then some people are saying stay out of it. So here's a question for you from this standpoint. So Tim Cook has a different approach than Elon Musk. Tim Cook is very low-key. He's not public. He's kind of quiet to himself. And some people call him the greatest CEO replacing a founder to increase the value of a company. And the data backs it up.
I think the data backs that up.
100 billion to 3 trillion, whatever the company's worth right now, but I think it peaked at 3. And he's done a good job. He's been able to hold off Obama's camp when they wanted the files back in San Bernardino with the shooting took place. Hey, tell us what's in the phone. I'm not doing it. But at the same time with Trump. And then he goes to Trump. He said, wait a minute, first openly gay Republican, first openly gay. Sometimes he's voted Republican, CEO, Fortune 500 company, goes and meets with Trump. And, why did you meet with Trump? He says, because Trump's the only president that calls me and takes my calls. The other guys didn't. So he plays an interesting role, what Tim Cook does. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not criticizing.
But here's where I'm going with it. This is where I'm going with it. This is where I'm going with it. I'm curious to know what you say with this. So, how much of it is his responsibility to the country versus his responsibility to the shareholders? And let me unpack this. So, here's where I'm going with this. I'm Tim Cook. Okay. Well, what an idiot. I can't believe he's doing this. He's back, he's bending the knee to China, and that's what it is. Versus he's quietly sitting there saying, okay, I'm playing a long game. I'm gradually moving all my manufacturing outside of China to India. India's coming up. India's doing very well. India's producing great engineers, manufacturing. They're investing into their military. They banned 100 apps in China, TikTok being one of them. They're one of the only biggest ones that did that. You got a few other ones that did it, but they're the big ones that did it, right? I'm going to gradually move there, but I'm not going to shake things up in China. And then eventually, we're 100% leaving China. Would investors and shareholders want a majorly disruptive decision to be made? We're out of China and the stock drops 60%, or is his sole fiduciary responsibility to downplay a move that he's making to gradually move away from somebody like China and know in long term we can't be doing business with these guys? Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm glad you asked this, Patrick. So the short answer to the question is his sole fiduciary duty is to his shareholders. And so I want to be clear. What did I say? I said that Tim Cook is a circus monkey who will jump as high as Xi Jinping tells him to. Now, I'm not criticizing Tim Cook any more than I'm criticizing the circus monkey. It's not the circus monkey's fault. I'm criticizing the circus. I'm criticizing the game. So this was a mistake that policymakers in the United States made dating back to the 1990s. It was a philosophy of democratic capitalism. Okay, when we opened up, dates back to Kissinger, where we said we could spread democracy to places like China by using capitalism as a vehicle to do it. We thought we could use our money, our investment over there to get them to be more like us. What they realized is they're actually the winners of this game. They realized they could use their money, access to their market, their supply chains, as a way to get us to be more like them. That was the game they played. So it's, in a certain sense, not Tim Cook's fault. What do I think actually, who do I think this rests at the feet of?
Circus monkey is not a compliment.
Well, it's not. I don't think it's the circus monkey's fault. It's the fault of the people who created the circus. So he's in a seat where in that narrow game he has to be playing the game he's playing. The real fault lies at the heart.
He has to be playing the game that he's playing.
Yes.
Okay.
And with one caveat that I'm going to come back to. So the problem is the bipartisan consensus in this country that created that backdrop where China was able to exploit us.
Okay.
Because you know what? Unlike the USSR, they now supply the shoes on our feet and the phones in our pocket. That's what makes them a lot harder of a rival to take on than the USSR, because we were never in that position with respect to the USSR. Now, there's one asterisk to this. Let me come back to it, which I will criticize Tim Cook for and Apple for, which is the sheer hypocrisy of not saying that peep in China while virtue signaling by giving hundreds of millions of dollars of the company's money to Black Lives Matter or related causes here at home. And again, I come back to the fact that he is a fiduciary. That is not his money. That is money that belongs to the shareholders. And now once you've done that, now what are you doing? You're actually deflecting your customers' scrutiny of your behavior in China. And that's a form of quasi-fraudulent and quasi-dishonest behavior by creating what I call blowing woke smoke or whatever you want to call it to deflect accountability from customers from seeing what's actually going on in China. And then I want to say one last thing back to now in defense of Tim Cook. As I told you about the racial equity audit that Apple was forced to conduct in 2022, Tim Cook didn't want to do it. So this problem with the social issues actually traces upstream of Tim Cook or Apple's board back to BlackRock. Okay. So the thing with BlackRock is they're the ones using the money of probably many listeners to this program to force Tim Cook to do something that he and Apple's board did not want to do, which was adopt this racial equity program, and yet that he was forced to do. Now your question will be, well, why does BlackRock do it? What's in it for them? This goes back to the China thing, where BlackRock will apply the emissions constraints and diversity mandates in the U.S. without doing it in China. Why? Because BlackRock then gets to be the first ever provider of mutual fund products in China because the CCP gives them favors when they behave asymmetrically. So that's kind of, this game runs deep. You got to understand it. And I appreciate you asking these questions because it kind of takes us further along than I get on, 3-minute hits on TV.
But the reason I ask this question, by the way, if you can go to the ANI article, January 12th, China ESG rating could become concern for investors, this is where they're going to get stuck. The hypocrisy is about to be exposed. China's ESG rating could become a concern for investors as the country's high carbon emissions, lack of transparency, and human rights concerns raise red flags. The reports suggest that China's ESG rating is lower than other major economies, and investors may need to consider the potential risks before investing in Chinese companies. It is noted that China's high carbon emissions and lack of transparency in its energy sector are major concerns, as well as a human rights record, particularly in regards to its treatment of ethnic minorities. Right now, here's the part. You know how I've interviewed Ray Dalio? David Rubenstein was here 4 weeks ago. You know who David Rubenstein is? He wrote the book, How to Invest.
Yep.
And in his book, if you've read How to Invest, 80% of the interviews, everybody was asked ESG. How are we using ESG? He interviews Larry Fink. He interviews everybody. So he's talking about, okay. So this right here, if they're sitting there saying ESG is the right responsible thing to do, they're gradually going to be cornered to say, if you're saying that's the right thing to do, but you got 40% of your money in China, you're not being responsible. They're not being responsible. How quickly can we remove the money out of them? They know they can't because China's not going to let you make that investment, remove the money that quickly. They're not going to sit there and say, yeah, go ahead. That's kind of how we do business. It's not going to happen. This could lead to them being exposed in a big way to say maybe this ESG thing isn't really the best idea. What do you think?
I mean, I believe that. I mean, I have been sounding the horn on this for 2.5, 3 years now, right? The linkage between China and ESG, back when I first started writing about this, was a topic that no one else was on. I have been pounding the pavement on this for the last 2 to 3 years, and you're right. The trends are changing. It is coming to a head. You know what? When I started Strive, I made a day one commitment. I said, we are not going to do business in China. Do business means launch an asset management business in China, because then you have the boot of the CCP on our neck. And if the boot of the CCP is on your neck, you can't be a good vocal fiduciary to American clients because you're conflicted in what you tell Exxon or Apple or Chevron to do as a shareholder. So, yes, these tides are changing. I don't think they're changing automatically. I think they're changing because people are stepping up in the form of public criticism, in the form of market alternatives. I hope I've done my part in that. And I'm optimistic, actually. It's not all doom and gloom here. I think that we are on our way to a new something. Now, we didn't talk about one of the reasons why this ESG stuff has thrived, I think, too, which is that, look, I think our generation of Americans, right, people under the age of 50 or under the age of 40 or whatever, millennials, Gen Z, we are hungry for a cause. That's a big part of this, too. Okay, we're hungry for meaning. We're hungry for identity. And the things that used to give us that sense of purpose, we could debate what it is: faith, patriotism, national identity, hard work used to be a source of identity, family used to be a sense of identity. Those things have disappeared. And so we have this black hole of a vacuum. And when you have a vacuum that runs that deep, that's when a lot of these social dogmas begin to fill that void instead. Wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, COVIDism, ESGism. And so I think that's also part of what's going on is there's a consumer demand for it. We have this sort of moral hunger that we're trying to satisfy by going to Ben & Jerry's and ordering a cup of ice cream with some social justice sprinkles on top, call that the S of ESG. When in fact, I think the other thing that's happening now is not just the China hypocrisy being exposed. That effect is starting to wear off, right? Because when you're really hungry, you don't fill your hunger with fast food. You can't fill that moral hunger with fast food. We're starting to realize that we're also hungry for something deeper. And so I think I predict here, and this is an optimistic prediction, that with peak ESG potentially behind us, we're also going to see a hunger for the revival of the nation. National identity. And it's part of, from an investing perspective, I think it's going to be part of an era of deglobalization that we enter. I don't think America is the only country going to go through this. I think Italy's going through it right now. I think Hungary. I think many parts of Western Europe are going through it. I think we're going to see the revival of the idea of the nation. But me speaking as an American, I hope we see a revival of the American nation in that context.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.